Imagine this. You're alone at night, deep in the woods, delivering a pizza to an eerie, secluded house. The air is still, the neighborhood is dead quiet, and the moment you step inside, something doesn't feel right. But what do you do when a friendly voice calls out, luring you further into the darkness? If you've ever had a strange or terrifying experience like this, share your story in the comments below. Let's see how many of us have been in situations where instinct might have saved the day. I was around 16 or 17 when this happened, working my first job at a rundown pizza place. It wasn't glamorous, but the pay was slightly better than other places, and delivery tips sweetened the deal. That night started off like any other. I came in for my usual 6 p.m. shift, expecting to wrap up by midnight. The first half of my shift passed without anything memorable. It wasn't until around 10 p.m. that things took a strange turn. An order came in for delivery to a neighborhood I wasn't very familiar with. It was about 15 minutes away, surrounded by trees and large houses that seemed isolated from the world. Driving there felt unsettling. The houses had long driveways and address numbers obscured by the trees, making it hard to find the place. I circled back a few times before spotting the house. The driveway led me through a canopy of trees where the silence was almost deafening. Finally, I reached a large, old-fashioned house that looked like it had been there for decades. Something about it immediately felt off. The wide-open door. I parked close to the house, grabbed the food, and made my way to the porch. That's when I noticed the front door. It wasn't just cracked open, but completely wide open. Most people might leave a door slightly ajar when expecting a delivery, but this was excessive. Still, I knocked lightly on the doorframe and called out, "Hello? Your pizza's here." A friendly male voice responded from inside. "Hey, would you mind bringing it in? I'm just setting up the table." It wasn't an unusual request. Customers often asked me to bring food to their kitchens or living rooms, usually in exchange for a better tip. Against my better judgment, I stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. No TV, no music, not even the hum of an air conditioner. It felt like the place was holding its breath. I followed the hallway to the kitchen, where I set the pizza box on the table. But no one was there. I had just heard the man's voice moments ago, yet there was no sign of him. The silence of the house felt even more oppressive now, as though the walls themselves were closing in. I turned to leave when his voice called out again. "Can you bring it in here, please?" This time, his voice came from another hallway that connected to the kitchen. My gaze followed the sound to a single door at the end of the hall. It was slightly ajar, but the room beyond it was pitch black. Something about the way his voice sounded. It was calm, but unnervingly close, like he was standing just behind the door. My instincts screamed at me to leave. Without a word, I turned and fast walked back through the hallway, out the front door, and into my car. My heart was racing as I pulled away from the house, glancing in the rearview mirror, half expecting someone to follow me. What haunts me to this day? I drove back to the pizza place in silence, my thoughts racing. I didn't tell anyone about what had happened. Honestly, I was embarrassed. I figured my co-workers would either laugh at me for being scared or scold me for entering the house in the first place. But thinking back on it now, I can't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. Why was the house so quiet? Why didn't I hear footsteps when the man supposedly moved? And why was he waiting in a dark room just out of sight? Nothing about that encounter was normal. I can't say for sure what would have happened if I'd gone into that dark room, but I'm grateful I trusted my instincts and got out when I did. To anyone reading this, if something feels wrong, trust your gut. It doesn't matter how harmless or polite someone seems. Your instincts exist for a reason, and they might just save your life. Have you ever had a gut feeling that saved you from danger? Or maybe you've experienced something similar while working late at night? Share your story in the comments below. I'd love to hear about it. Let's start a conversation about the importance of trusting your instincts. It was the winter of early December, and I was 20 years old, working with my parents at their small takeout restaurant. The place was quiet and specialized in to-go orders. Being a college student with a hectic schedule, I could only manage late-night shifts. My parents were understanding, and my role mostly involved working the to-go counter and cleaning up after hours. One night, about an hour into my shift, I noticed a car parked in the small parking lot outside. The restaurant was a standalone shop with a tiny lot, so there was no traffic from other businesses. Initially, I thought nothing of it. Whoever parked there probably figured no one would care, and I didn't either. About 20 minutes later, the car left, and I moved on with my tasks. The next night, however, the same car returned at the same time. This time, it caught my attention. I walked to the front of the building to get a better look. It was an older gray sedan with dark windows, headlights on, facing directly at the restaurant. They didn't seem to be hiding or trying to avoid attention. The sight gave me an uneasy feeling, so I double-checked the locks on the doors and went back to cleaning. Their presence was unnerving, especially with the large glass front windows making me feel exposed. Like the night before, they eventually left. After finishing my shift, I clocked out and headed to my car. Even though the gray sedan was gone, I felt uneasy walking through the parking lot. The idea of the same car showing up 2 nights in a row with no apparent reason stuck with me. I drove home, trying to shake off the discomfort, but it lingered. The next day, I decided to skip work and focus on my schoolwork, giving myself a break. When I returned to work 2 nights later, I couldn't shake the sense of unease. The memory of that car made me constantly glance out the windows, half expecting it to reappear. But to my relief, I didn't see it the entire shift. 3 hours passed and I finished cleaning. I started to feel like maybe it was all in my head. I packed up, locked the door, and began crossing the parking lot. The moment I stepped outside, that uneasy feeling hit me like a wave. My heart started racing as adrenaline coursed through me. I glanced around, scanning the lot, and then I saw it. A car sitting far back in the shadows, away from the lit areas. Within seconds, the car started moving, driving toward me at an alarming speed. My pulse spiked, and I sprinted toward my car, the sound of screeching tires echoing behind me. Just as I reached my car, the gray sedan slammed on its brakes beside me. Before I could process what was happening, the car doors swung open, and I heard footsteps rushing toward me. I didn't look back. My only focus was getting into my car. I fumbled with the door, hands shaking as I managed to get inside. Through the windows, I saw 3 men wearing masks and hoodies sprinting toward me. My breath caught in my throat as they started pounding on the windows and pulling at the door handles, trying to force their way in. With trembling hands, I turned the key, struggling to get the engine started. The noise of their fists on the glass and their frantic movements made it almost impossible to think. Finally, the car roared to life and I slammed it into drive. The tires screeched as I sped out of the lot, narrowly avoiding the men as they lunged at the vehicle. I drove to a nearby well-lit gas station and called 911, my body still trembling. The police arrived quickly, but there wasn't much they could do. The outside of our shop didn't have cameras, and I hadn't seen the men's faces clearly. The entire encounter felt surreal. After that night, I never saw the car or those men again. But the memory of their masked faces, their frantic pounding on my windows, and the chilling feeling of being hunted in that empty parking lot has stayed with me ever since. I used to work for a small startup company. Honestly, I was never quite sure what they actually did, as I was just the security guard. The office itself was small and nondescript, not the kind of place you'd expect to require security. It made my job easy though, since I didn't have to patrol multiple floors or deal with a lot of people. My shift started at 9 p.m. I'd turn on the security alarm system and settle into the security room, which was equipped with a few monitors displaying feeds from the outdoor cameras. These cameras were old and low quality, but since nothing ever happened, it didn't seem like a big deal. The first few hours of the night were uneventful, as usual, but around 1 a.m. I heard a distinct sound, a latch clicking shut. The noise startled me because it was completely unexpected. I paused for a moment, then got up and stepped into the hallway. Everything appeared exactly as I'd left it. The hallway had just 3 doors, all of which were closed. I checked each room, opening the doors and glancing inside. Each room was filled with standard office desks, and nothing seemed out of place. At this point, I began to doubt what I'd heard. The building's security system would have triggered an alarm if one of the main doors had been opened. Still, to be cautious, I left the security room door open when I returned, hoping I'd catch any suspicious noise more clearly. I replayed the camera footage from the last few minutes, just in case I missed something, but there was no movement, no signs of anyone outside or inside. After about 20 minutes of silence, I convinced myself that the noise was just my imagination. But then, a faint sound echoed down the hallway, a door creaking open slowly. My heart raced as I stood up and looked down the hall. One of the doors that I had just checked earlier was now slightly ajar. I froze for a moment, trying to rationalize what I was seeing. The alarms hadn't gone off, and nothing had shown up on the cameras, so how could someone be inside? Gathering my courage, I approached the door and pushed it open wider. The room beyond was dark and quiet, with rows of desks bathed in faint moonlight filtering through the windows. I cautiously stepped inside, walking past each desk. As I neared the back of the room, something caught my eye, a faint movement along the wall like a shadow shifting. I turned my head, and that's when I saw him. Under one of the desks was a man crouched in the shadows. He had black hair, dark circles under his eyes, and a disturbing expression. A mix of fear and anger, like he was caught but wasn't sure how to react. The moment our eyes met, he began to rise. I didn't wait to see what he would do. I bolted from the room and ran into the hallway, heading straight for the front doors. As soon as I pushed them open, the security alarms blared, automatically notifying the police. Once outside, I kept my distance but stayed close enough to watch the building's front entrance. Within 30 seconds, the man burst through the doors and ran around the side of the building, disappearing into the night. When the police arrived, we reviewed the camera footage from the entire night. Strangely, there was no evidence of the man entering the building. No doors had been opened and no alarms had been triggered before I fled. It was as if he had just appeared inside. The officers questioned the company, but they claimed to know nothing about it. They insisted nothing was missing from the office, though I couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't being completely honest. It seemed odd to hire a security guard for such a small, unassuming office, unless there was a specific reason. My theory: it might have been an unhinged former employee, someone the company knew about but didn't want to admit to. I stayed at that job for a few more months before leaving for a better opportunity. I never found out how that man got inside or what he was doing there. The mystery of that night still haunts me to this day.